Happy Monday, everybody. Brand new intro, TDR's Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Big show, action-packed show. Lots of guests on here today. We've got CEO of Eaze coming on, one of the most well-known cannabis companies, private companies in the space, as well. Adam Goers, Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs, the Cannabist Company Holdings, joins us to talk about latest news involving Washington. We're now 2 weeks away from this ALJ hearing, so we want to get the latest in what he's hearing. And more specifically, why you should listen to this podcast today. H.C. Wainwright gave a price target of $195 for what stock? Cybin. So their CEO, Doug Drysdale, is going to come in, talk about their announcement this morning regarding some really compelling data that they just announced. So lots going on. Let's welcome in AV here on a Monday. Good to see you. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. How was it?
Did. Got a Dolphins W, and it was nice weather the entire weekend in Florida, so I've got absolutely no complaints.
Look at that haircut, too.
Yeah. It was time.
Did you get the haircut done on Friday?
Right after the show, I ran out of my house.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I had hair like you, buddy. Lots going on here today. I know. And we had a busy week last week, but we will get into the cannabis space eventually. But first thing we want to bring up is don't look or sleep on this now, but we did actually a podcast last night on psychedelic stocks. We told some people that we're going to have the CEO of Cybin in, and that's Doug Drysdale. So let's welcome in Mr. Drysdale back to the podcast. Good to see you. Happy Monday. And how are things? It's interesting times, I think, for this space because, I think that was, let's face it, it was quiet for a period of time. Yes, there was companies like yourselves doing a lot of work trial related, but I do think that we've seen some optimism in the space over the last 10 to 12 days, don't you think?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Good to see you again. Yeah, I agree. It's there's with the new administration coming in, I think there's a lot of attention now on cannabis and psychedelics, and great to see that, we're getting front and center attention for the work that we do. It's great.
Yeah, I think 100%. Well, look, before we get into the actually details from your announcement this morning, like RFK being appointed as the new of HHS, and let's face it, he put things like a lot of attention on the space 12 days ago when he said we need to do further research pertaining to psychedelics. Do you, based on conversations with your network, the conversations that you have, do you think this administration is serious and will make it a priority based on some of the people that you've had conversations with, Doug?
Look, I think both sides of the aisle are supportive of mental health treatments and they're supportive of psychedelics. So I see that this is not a negative. Look, we know that RFK is a controversial figure.
I hear you.
But on the other hand, he's super passionate about our nation's health, whether it's drugs or it's the food chain. And he's motivated to get some things done. So to have someone in the administration as HHS secretary that has said that he would like to see some regulation, some regulatory framework around psychedelics. That's I think that's a good thing. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is bring these treatments to patients in a regulated way.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why he wants to make this a priority is because there's stats and data that shows over 20 million Americans have been diagnosed with MDD, major depressive disorder, Your company, Cybin, as we know, may have a solution for that. You announced earlier today that your leading research compound, CYB003, reported 71% remission in patients with major depressive disorder. Based off of this news, what does this announcement mean for the company?
Well, not just 71% remission, but 71% remission. That means patients no longer having depression. 71% of them after just 2 doses, 12 months later.
12. That's key to understand that, right?
Yeah. So look, we ran a robust phase 2 study, a placebo-controlled study. We saw 75% remission rates at 4 months. And then we ran this observational follow-up, open label follow-up up to 12 months. And sure, you can look at the data and say it's a small sample, but we had 21 patients in the follow-up. But when you see 100% response rates, 71% remission rates, directionally that's super exciting. We announced last week that we've just initiated our phase 3 program, and this is at a point, a few months after the whole MDMA AdCom scenario. So we've been through that whole discussion with FDA, and we've got FDA clearance on our phase 3 program.
That's great.
After all of that stuff. So we've cleared the regulatory doubts and hurdles. We've answered all the FDA's questions. They've given us the green light. And now today we announced this data that shows I think a big de-risking of phase 3 with that kind of outcome 12 months after just 2 doses.
With the numbers that you brought, I mean, a lot of the TAM that we talk about is psychedelics kind of taking over for SSRIs the way that they are in the market right now. Empirically, how does the data with 71% of participants in remission and in the further data, how does it stack up? How does it stack up empirically to SSRIs?
Right. So SSRIs you dose every day, not just twice a year like we're going to be able to do, I think, with CYB3. So you take them every day. Most of the data points are at 6 weeks. So every day for 6 weeks,
Okay.
about 1/3 of patients on SSRIs are in remission after 6 weeks of chronic dosing. I don't think that gets any better a year later. Right? And patients are taking these treatments every day and with the side effects. So it means that 2/3 of patients aren't in remission. You know, they may have some relief of symptoms, but they are still having to take this drug every day. We see CYB3 as an interventional treatment that can come in and, for the majority of patients, help relieve their depression very quickly and for a long period of time.
And for those that don't know, is 003, is it being administered with talk therapy? Is it psychedelic assisted therapy? How is the patient and, let's say, the therapist engaging in the process?
Yeah, so during treatment, we leave the patient alone, honestly.
Okay.
Psilocybin is a bit of a wavy experience. There are peaks and troughs of intensity. And some patients on the first dose can resist. They can, maybe they're skeptical, maybe they're a bit anxious. And so some can resist. So the last thing you want to do is kind of interrupt patients when they're in their flow. Also, psilocybin affects the language centers. So patients can't really get involved with psychotherapy. So we're doing the opposite of that, actually. We're leaving them alone, where they're wearing an eye mask, they're wearing a headset, listening to music, and they're focused internally. There's someone in the room observing them for safety, but there's no intentional, interaction.
Makes sense.
So from a therapeutic perspective, there's a lot of introspection going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, we don't let patients go into these sessions uneducated. We provide education and informed consent up front, and we help the patient debrief after. And we do that for both the active group and the placebo group. And so they're all getting that same kind of pre-care and aftercare. And the difference between the two groups, obviously, is the drug.
Okay. So as we enter into a phase 3, besides the obvious based on trial sizes, like what's the biggest difference as to what you're monitoring versus a phase 3 to phase 2? Because I think there's a lot of people that are still trying to understand the science of it all. We all know the way trials are structured and set up is key. Even though you may have a solution, it's how these are structured up. I think it's some of the reasons why Compass has run into a few issues recently. But how do you prevent something like that from happening, and walk us through how this is set up? And, hopefully gets the outcome that many Americans really want and have a drug that's definitely licensed and commercialized in the coming years for this.
Yeah, so I think 2 areas of concern have come up in the last few months. One is Lykos's concerns, which I think were very specific to their application.
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus then around functional unblinding. So we've spent a ton of time on our own design and with FDA designing the studies to mitigate against that. And so one of the studies has a 3-arm design designed to overcome that. And then you have the challenges that Compass appears to have had with recruiting. And we think that's very specific to their protocol and their population. So Compass is recruiting treatment-resistant depression patients.
Okay.
That means those patients have to have failed 2 treatments in the current depressive episode. And to meet that criteria, Compass has to go back and document that from their medical records. They're also dosing their treatment as a monotherapy, which means they're asking their patients to come off their background medications and before taking the test drug, the study drug. And that obviously, those 2 things, I think, just lead to higher hurdles when it comes to screening and recruiting patients. We are not having to document patients. We're recruiting patients from a much larger major depressive disorder, MDD population, so not having had to have 2 failures. And we're also allowing patients to stay on their background medication. So that's less scary for them as they're coming into the study. So we're hoping that our protocol design will mitigate against some of the delays that they've been seeing.
Coming in with their current with their current medications, whether it be SSRIs or something different, how does that change the trial design, let's say, when you go into phase 3? Because is the ultimate goal for them to go through the treatment with 003 and then come off those SSRIs at the end, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in clinical practice, that's the goal, right? Okay. So the way the studies are designed, there are 2 short-term studies going out to 12 weeks. And in each of those studies, patients have to remain on stable doses of their SSRIs or their SNRIs. So they come in on their doses, stable doses of antidepressants, both in the placebo group and the active group. And we measure them in a placebo-controlled way through 12 weeks. After 12 weeks, we follow up patients for up to a year after dosing. And in that full year follow-up, it's more observational. So if patients need to add more medications, they're allowed to do it. We just record it. If they come off their medications, that'd be great. We record that as well.
Right.
And so we're collecting data over that time to see what happens over time.
Doug, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, with phase 3 paradigm underway now, I mean, what are some of the main endpoints that you're looking out for in terms of efficacy and safety to get out of the study?
Yeah, I mean, so far the safety profile has been fantastic. We've seen no serious adverse events and only side effects during the 2 dosing sessions, and no other new side effects in the whole year of follow-up. So that's very different to daily dosing. We'll be looking for similar outcomes as we did in the phase 2, which is reduction in depression scores 6 weeks after dosing compared to placebo, and response rates and remission rates. And if we can get anywhere close to what we're seeing out of the phase 2, this is going to be transformational for the space.
Yeah. H.C. Wainwright, a price target $195. I know that's stuff that you don't pay attention to all that much, but aggressive, I would say. Like, we obviously want growth, but what's your current cash position right now, Doug? Because we all know phase 3 trials are not cheap, and like timeline for this phase 3 trial, what are we looking at?
Yeah, we expect to have a top line readout from phase 3 in 2026, hopefully the first half of 2026. We've got cash runway to get us through to that readout. And look, I mean, we have a market cap right now around $220-230 million. It's kind of a crazy market cap when you think about the scale of what we're trying to disrupt. 40 million patients in the US are on SSRIs for depression and anxiety. I think when you look at esketamine, I think esketamine is now treating somewhere in those like 40 to 50,000 patients, and they're trending over $1 billion in sales. And all of the large antidepressant drugs, antipsychotic drugs like Lexapro, Abilify, all reached around $4 billion. In revenue. So if you think that's a rough ballpark for peak sales, then a $200 million valuation is kind of nuts. So I'm not surprised to see much higher price targets given where we are.
Yeah, we've had a few comments here. Big Pharma would want to block that. No, Big Pharma wants people taking drugs daily once a year. Well, when you think about some of the stuff that's taken place recently, and like I said, some of the big pharma companies were hit actually, last week based off the RFK news and some of the stuff that he wants to do. But don't you think now if some of his initiatives start to actually come into play and we start to see change, but now could there be interest regarding acquisitions in this space? If Big Pharma realizes that, look, if there is going to be a change and this is the new sort of landscape for mental health and how we're treating it, this would not only interest them more, would it not, in comparison to blocking something?
Yeah, look, I mean, the older antidepressants are all generic now, so the branded pharma companies aren't making anything off of those. So they are looking for innovation. RFK's beef with pharma is often that drugs that come along, new drugs, are only just incrementally better than the one before. It's a little bit better, or a me too. And I can understand that frustration. I mean, that's kind of how science works, right? It's incremental. But what we've got here is the opportunity for a paradigm shift. That's the kind of thing that he's looking for, is drugs that can really move the needle. Yeah.
Well, look, we're in a stage now where I know it wasn't the news that we wanted to see back in the summer. We're getting Lycos. I think there was a dark cloud that was kind of hanging over in the space. But do you think now we're into November? Have we moved on from that? Do you feel?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I would say that fundamental biotech investors were not phased by the MDMA AdCom. It was very specific to that program. I'm certain they're getting clarity on the path forward, and that drug works. It does. MDMA works for PTSD. They just have to do the right regulatory work to get an approval.
Yeah,
I think us showing longevity, durability data here is one of the final key pieces, because look, it's great that these treatments work and they work really well, but nobody wants to come back and have a psychedelic treatment every month, right? So you want to have durability. So now we can show that patients may only have to come back, for treatment maybe twice a year. Yeah. And you compare that to interventional treatments like TMS and esketamine, where patients might be coming back every 2 weeks. Those clinics quickly run out of space.
Yeah, makes sense.
So we can free up a lot of resources.
Well, like you said, paradigm shift. These are incredible results. Great work. We're rooting for you, because it's, not only Anthony and I, but there's 40 million Americans right now that are also rooting for you too, because we do need a paradigm shift. But as always, we'll be watching this industry very closely, because it just woke up. I think it's been around, but like you said, a lot of biotech investors have been following this closely, but it's starting to take shape where more and more people outside of that are understanding what the true potential is. But tell the team we say hi. Let's keep in touch, and congrats on the news from this morning.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you again. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Good seeing you.
Big biotech background. And this, like psychedelic companies or big pharma companies, they like to buy off of not only the data, but the people that are involved. And with his background, you can understand why it's a company that has garnered a lot of interest among psychedelic investors.
Absolutely. And I think Doug nailed it with that. This is a paradigm shift. This isn't keeping the status quo. And huge. It's kind of dehumanizing to hear people think, well, big pharma just want revenue streams. They want recurring revenue streams via daily medication. They should be focused on curative therapies that actually are going to repair people, instead of just keeping them on drugs.
Yes.
For their entire life. So that's really the paradigm that psychedelics is looking to break, and shatter the ceiling on.
It's crazy if some of these gets passed overnight, like you said, a $200 million valuation. But these companies, and again, drug development's high risk. Proceed at your own caution. But if one does actually pass, look no further than Johnson & Johnson and Spravato. They're going to do over $1 billion in sales this year. Think about that.
Well, I'm hoping what happens is that RFK getting into HHS creates dialogue with the CEOs and the leaders in the psychedelic space, brings them together with pharma executives, and brings them into the White House and into the federal government to have a broader conversation about what needs to be done as it relates to mental health.
Agreed.
Because that seems like a just obvious starting point.
There's optimism in the air. Hopefully we get change. Somebody posted a picture on this weekend. It was a picture of Trump, Tulsi, Elon, and there was one more other person, and said, believe it or not, these were all Democrats at one time. So anyways, I won't get too much into that, but let's move on. And speaking of moving on, let's welcome in. He's leading cannabis delivery company in the industry and making his media tour here today. He's now on with TDR. Let's welcome in Cory Azzalino, first time to the podcast. Good to meet you. How are things?
Likewise. Good. Thank you guys for having me on. As they say, a long-time listener, first-time caller. So
good to have you on.
You want to be a producer of the show? That was great. Cory, I love that hat. Where are you based out of?
I am based out of Los Angeles. So the company's actually headquartered in Denver.
Yep.
So we've got operations in 4 states: California, Colorado, Florida, and Denver.
Yep. Listen, we always talk about the public side, but the private side, I was actually at an event a week and a half ago in Michigan. I could not believe how strong the Michigan market amongst these private companies are actually operating right now. But listen, we wanted to have you on. I know you've actually announced this earlier, but you announced a Series B financing round that saw you raise $10 million to acquire select assets of Eaze Technologies, your predecessor company, to fund the reopening of 70 Eaze and Green Dragon locations across California, Colorado, Florida, and Michigan. Part of this announcement was actually that billionaire Jim Clark, founder of Netscape, provided the funding. So I'd like to ask, when you're in a room with a billionaire, walk us through what he saw when it comes to growth potential that maybe the average investor would not see.
Well, I think first of all, Jim's been, I think this is the first time we've really kind of publicly announced his involvement, but Jim has been the leading supporter and backer of the company for a number of years that predated me. So he has, a fairly sizable investment in the company. And the $10 million Series B, which probably doesn't sound like a significant capital raise in this landscape or in this environment, is really the kind of end of a long restructuring process that Eaze went through. Just by way of history, Eaze has been in the industry since 2014, so we've been we were really kind of a leader and pioneer in the California ecosystem. We raised a lot of capital. We raised over $350 million of capital in our history.
A lot of money. Yeah.
But then that capital was raised through basically our Series E on the equity side. And then we did a debt round. And ultimately, Jim participated in the debt round that, there were some busted covenants. And over time, basically the business had to restructure. And so this is kind of us emerging from that restructure. And it's truly kind of a new company. But, we basically had to kind of take the medicine and, which will probably be coming on the public side for a lot of companies and effectively restructure our balance sheet because, under what he did see, though, is underlying is that we do have a very healthy business. We just had a bit of a busted cap table and balance sheet. And so this is investment is his kind of further belief that, the company underlying is, very viable. We've got some really unique and differentiated positioning, particularly in California, that we will, try and leverage in other states as we continue on our journey.
So where's the company go from here from like a focus perspective? Because you guys dominated California for a long time in the delivery game. You've got Green Dragon in Florida with 39 doors that I see you're doubling the canopy and then adding assets in Colorado and Michigan. Is there a certain focus that this cap raise, let's say, is going to be allocated towards as far as the use of funds go and like the direction of the business? Or is it kind of bringing all four of these online, I guess, complementary together throughout the enterprise?
Yeah, what we realized a couple of years ago is really like the delivery business is amazing at creating more volume per location. So for us, we have 70 locations. We are purely a retailer. We have no wholesale exposure anywhere in the company. And so our two most profitable, most successful locations in California are where we have delivery plus retail. You just get a lot bigger volume per store. You have the fixed cost of the store, and therefore, and the delivery economics actually work quite well when you do it the way in which we do it. So, the questions obviously pose, which parts of the business are profitable, which are not. Our California business is quite profitable. Our Colorado business is quite profitable. It shouldn't come necessarily as a shock that our Florida business is unprofitable today. Now, the primary constraint for a market like Florida, and this brings you back to your question of like, how do these businesses come together over the long term, is we would like to offer delivery anywhere we offer retail. But Florida being fully vertical, the challenge is really, do you have enough product that it even makes sense to do delivery? What I will also say is delivery is inherently a worse business from the same dollar of revenue in the sense that you basically have the cost to deliver the product from your location rather than the customer walking in your door. Now you pick up volume. So that's the kind of the offset there. But in a market like Florida, where you can only sell what you grow and manufacture, our bottleneck has really been just on the production side. I think, we have a 400,000 square foot facility, but that is not all being used. We really have a 200,000 square foot facility, of which half is set aside for kind of manufacturing, or call it really 75,000 square feet is manufacturing and production. The other 125 is really for the cultivation side of the business, of which we've invested a lot of equity dollars in kind of the infrastructure and foundational levels of that cultivation. It's 100% indoor, but we have been underproducing in terms of like flower canopy. And that's because of a power upgrade that we've been waiting on for like 9 months. So when you look at our results in OMU, and I will admit our sales per store are not anywhere near where we want them to be. And so the perception is either that's a brand or quality issue, or what we know is it's actually just a limit of supply. We actually just don't have enough product. We were very good at opening stores. We were not as good at bringing on the cultivation online. And so we've been limited by basically just needing this power upgrade, which the hurricanes and everything had just kind of consistently delayed. We are hopeful it will happen this week. But that 64,000 square feet of canopy is already fully built out. And then within that, the north side of the building, we can actually add another 64,000 square feet of canopy for what I would say is far less per square foot on a go-forward basis than you'd expect, because we already basically invested in all the infrastructure there.
Okay. And how are you approaching Florida in, let's say, a post A3 world? A lot of us were excited about adult use coming online and the prospects of it coming online. From a door perspective, you're in the top third of the MMTCs in Florida. How are you approaching the market? What's your outlook for the market?
So we have 39 stores open. We have 43 leases, so we'll bring on the other 4 stores, and then we will not lease any more stores. That gives us pretty good footprint statewide. Then I think eventually, once we have enough product, we'd lean into the delivery side of our business. And so for us, I would say new store expansion and will be kind of halted. And then the question just becomes, how much throughput can you do through our stores, which we are, clearly a laggard in terms of sales per store. So we think we could do quite a bit better. And so then it becomes a market share. Can we basically steal market share? What are our advantages? I think as 100% indoor, and the way in which we built our indoor, being a late starter and coming out of California and Colorado, where we expect and do sell $15 eighths and $15 half gram and $20 full gram vapes quite profitably. I would say a lot of people did invest more money in cultivation. You will definitely see price compression in Florida that will help the Florida patients. You'll see unit prices continue to decline, and then the question becomes, can you kind of stomach that decline, and are you set up correctly from a fixed cost perspective to manage that price compression, which is inevitably coming. The question of how much that will occur probably has everything to do with Trulieve and what they do with their kind of latent capacity.
I had those conversations.
You think I was just going to say that the recurring theme has been, let's wait and see what happens on price. Is she going to go for price, or is she going to go for margin? One of the two.
Yeah. And so, I think for us, because we were a late starter, our store model is very much the express store model. We have low cost, cheap locations that we did not expend a lot of money that will continue to refurbish and refresh over time. But we really, kind of view ourselves as, more in the value brand sector. But what does value mean? It's quality at relatively good prices, right? It doesn't mean that we're not cheap. We're all indoor, right? We're 100% indoor. But can you grow that at a price, that is a compelling value proposition for customers? And I think we have a lot of room for price compression, kind of built into our expectations, just coming out of those competitive markets. And then getting that late start just means that we don't have, any expensive sale leasebacks. We don't have expensive kind of V1 retail leases. We're averaging sub $10,000 a store in terms of lease costs. And so we are kind of built for that price compression. We would have loved Amendment 3 to pass. We were, certainly gearing up and ready to go for that. But I think we're still prepared to compete in what will now be a more competitive market.
Very, very much so. Well, there's lots on the go. Like we've talked about consolidation a lot, Anthony, in the state of Florida, but you've talked about even Cory, some of your stores have lagged in the past. So what do you think is lagging right now in the Florida market for you to, I guess, improve, or to your point, change in some ways, if that makes sense?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it starts, the things that we measure, right, is we have a specific freshness policy where we basically try and make sure that everything is sold within 90 days of packaging date. And so one of our measures is, do we have any product aging, right? We have under 2% that are even past the 90-day threshold. So under 2% of our products are past the 90-day threshold. So we don't have an aging problem. We do have a just kind of sales velocity and just getting enough product on our menu. So that is the problem we're most focused on solving, is how do we get more production, more units on shelf? And then, there's, just like everybody else, there will be a kind of pricing and promotions level that we have to hit. But we also just have a brand awareness issue where we have to actually market and actually get ourselves and the brand better known in Florida. Because I think people who are very, into the industry and into the weeds know about OMMU reporting and can see all those metrics. But at the end of the day, it's, do customers actually know that you exist? Do they know what your value proposition, and do they know why they should walk into your store versus, the behemoths of Trulieve or Verano or Curaleaf? And so I think on the other end of the spectrum, you can see somebody like a Sunburn, who's done an incredible job on brand, has done an incredible job of very quickly ramping sales per store. So I think from our perspective, we're optimistic we could see similar lifts in terms of our overall sales, but it comes down to, do you have enough product to sell, and then at what price are you selling it?
Right, makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were 100% indoor. Which
I would say when we first started in the market, we did ourselves a disservice, and then we were in an old kind of Gen 1 grow that was kind of crappy, and then we basically didn't we had like a 6-month lag where we actually weren't even able to produce product. And so that's when we were selling kind of like aged product, and it was bad from a market perception. But now, we've been in our new facility since kind of mid 23, and it's fully our facility that we built from the ground up.
And then how's the California market? I mean, we talk about the California market a lot in terms of, unfortunately, like receivership and the different dynamics that are in the California market. I'm assuming there has to be people that are there making money. It's a $4.5 billion market at the end of the day. What's it looking like right now, just from an overall, let's say, market dynamic standpoint?
I think it definitely depends on where you play in the ecosystem. I think that as a pure play retailer, we are less whipsawed by the pricing dynamics on the wholesale market, which has been, I think, where you've heard about the most pain. Now, it's no secret also that on the retail side, you have a lot of payables issues and brands not being able to collect from retailers. So that still very much implies that there's challenges with the big retailers' balance sheets and their ability to pay. I think you've seen State House go into receivership. You've seen Goers have a limited receivership and their balance sheet is troubled. Now, underlying both those businesses, what I would say equivalent, very similar to ours, is that there's actually a good retail business. Most of them have probably some legacy issues, right? Where I think if you were to see if Chapter 11 would be available to us, there would be a lot of just quick Chapter 11. The underlying businesses are good. They probably have like a bad lease or two that they need to get rid of. But the underlying businesses at this point are, I think, probably relatively stable. And the cost cuttings have occurred to make the businesses at least probably kind of cash flow if they didn't have these huge debt burdens. Most of these companies have huge debt burdens that were, issues from 2014 to 2018, even pre-legalization. And it's just like these problems keep snowballing on each other, and there's just no way to like reset the capital structure. So I think what you're going to get is a lot of these equity cap tables getting flushed out, a lot of these businesses kind of reemerging post receivership, and you'd be like, oh, well, that's actually a pretty healthy business. There's nothing inherently wrong with the business. It's just has a broken cap table and balance sheet.
That makes sense. I think there's going to be a lot of recapping here in the next 12 to 24 months, industry wide.
It's
not just
more difficult depending on if you're private or public. We had a little bit of a unique situation, and again, we didn't willingly go through the receivership. The lenders put us through that, but we're able to emerge on the other side with no debt, no tax liabilities, cash, clean operating business, and
got to speak to that governor too about those taxes. God damn, man.
And they're scheduled to go up in a year from now.
Are.
I didn't realize you got to pay. Wasn't there an additional 10% tax if you're operating within like city limits of Los Angeles too, from what I read?
Yeah. So when you go, our average basket size pre-tax is right around $100. And so when you go from your pre-tax to post-tax, it goes from $100 closer to $140.
That's crazy.
So, it's a big sticker shock, especially for an e-commerce company. When people go to check out and you think you're getting pretty good value and pretty good deal, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, those taxes are pretty egregious.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that cart abandonment is pretty high once you get to checkout and they see the taxes.
It's actually very good relative to most industries, but it's still higher than we want it to be. So there's still a fairly decent sized drop off. And when we do like churn surveys and things like that, we see a lot of like, your prices are higher. It's like, well, your prices are higher than the illicit market or traditional market. That's for sure. Which is usually what we're.
Well, that's the involvement and more education, like you said, brand awareness for the industry. That'll take time, but we got to run. But the last thing I wanted to ask you is just like, look, everybody knows this company, knows this brand, and it's been known as a delivery service, but now like a multi-state operator. What's the clear defining message that you want to be known as for Eaze moving forward? What is it?
I think ultimately we want to be just the best in class and most convenient service to get cannabis, whether that's through retail or delivery. Ultimately, customers have different preferences. Some people want the cheapest way to access their cannabis, which is going to be in a retail store. Some people want the most convenient, which is going to be delivered at home compliantly. And we just want to be able to meet the customer however they want to get their cannabis and provide that cannabis as high quality and as good value. Like I said, value being quality relative to price.
Well said. Well, listen, are you at MJ Biz next month in Vegas?
I will be at the Benzingas, but not at MJ Biz.
Oh,
Okay.
shoot. I was hoping to see you. I saw it to be like those football players after the game where we swap jerseys. I could give you a TDR hat and I would get one of those Eaze hats. Those are sharp. I love those.
I've got the other version here, so I'll give you one of those now. Where's the camera? There we go.
Those.
I'll send them to you guys. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Listen, appreciate the time. Congrats on the news and best of luck moving forward. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Cory.
Thank you.
As you were saying before we actually came on here today, one of the most well-known brands in the cannabis space you were touching on, right?
Yeah. I mean, Eaze, like I've said, I've been investing in this industry since 2014. Eaze has been around since I've been around in the sector. And I mean, it's good for them to raise this capital, get on the right footing and move forward. I'm excited to see what they do with Green Dragon. I'm going to go actually check it out probably tomorrow or the next day as far as their location goes, right by my house.
What's that say about them raising $10 million in these market conditions?
Tough. It's a tough capital raising environment. I can definitely assure you that.
Yeah. Talk about a tough environment. We've had our fair share in this industry, and it pertains to Washington. So we want to learn more about what's going on in DC. Let's welcome in the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs, the Cannabist Company Holdings, Mr. Adam Goers, back to the podcast. Happy Monday. It's been a while.
It has been a while. A little bit has happened in the meantime.
You got the greatest voice in cannabis. Just say, hello, everybody. I'm Adam Goers.
If this doesn't work out for me, maybe a podcasting is my future.
I think the intro is phenomenal. But hey, look, let's get straight to it. Lots going on. I think the last time we had you on was probably 6 weeks ago. And I feel like it's been like 6 years ago. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, let me tell you. The candidate for president who supported cannabis won the election. Wasn't a big surprise since both of them supported cannabis. But can we just take a bit of an acknowledgement? I know it's been a bumpy ride for the industry and the markets.
Yeah,
I'd say it's for the markets. It's been a bumpy ride. But for that part, kudos that we're heading in the right path. And it's not just luck, it's work. It's also acknowledging just where the populace is. But President Trump is there on this. I know we're going to talk more about that, but I think that's a big takeaway.
I know for investors, sometimes you contemplate whether or not you should buy or sell a stock. You don't do anything. And sometimes it's the best move you made. And I couldn't help but think last week, and I was saying this on the podcast, Anthony, in the live stream, that the first comment that Joe Rogan made in his podcast about why Kamala did not want to come on his podcast and some of the things that he could and couldn't talk about. And the first thing he brought up was marijuana legalization. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like just think if this was to be elected, that shocked me to think that was something that she did not want to address. But to your point, whatever, that's dumb. There's no sense bringing that up. We do know that there's a president-elect, but what are you seeing and hearing in Washington right now? Is there optimism building? Is there caution towards the industry? Like what's some of the feedback that you've been seeing or hearing over the last few weeks?
Well, I mean, Trump is, and let's on the Kamala, let's hit that one. We know where she stands on. It's not what she wanted to talk about in that venue, right? But we've got a president-elect who's long talked about the promises made, promises delivered piece. And no matter if you love him or hate, I think one thing you can see out of Donald Trump in the last 12 days since he won the election is that he is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. On all his different moves. And I think
he's a transactional president. He's a transactional president. Go on, finish.
He's not tiptoeing around anything. And I think you see that in the nominations, which have not been everyone's cup of tea on, for some or most issues, but let's be clear. RFK Jr. and Matt Gaetz are both incredible on this issue. I mean, Matt Gaetz has been someone since the day he walked into Congress when he was a state legislator, has been working on this, has worked with the industry for years and years. And it's a huge, I think, sign that Trump, one, is not hiding on this issue. Is that the reason RFK Jr. and Matt Gaetz were each picked? Well, I'll tell you, RFK Jr. has made, cannabis legalization as a part of, his public health, his public health goals, very interconnected with his broader policy. Matt Gaetz has been one of the biggest proponents to President-elect Trump on moving on this issue.
Yep.
And frankly, I think Matt Gaetz, some discussions right now on whether he's going to be confirmed. I don't, also discussions of whether or not there's going to be confirming anybody, and whether or not we do recess appointments. But, Trump is also very clear in the people that he's picking. He's not picking people that are going to have their own personal fiefdoms to do whatever it is that they please on this issue, on any issue, right? That's clear.
So what do you guys think? Like, is there concerns? Like, Anthony, we talked about this on Friday, and
I don't have a concern in the world as long as these guys get confirmed, which today Trump was even talking about. I think it was the Federal Vacancy Act of 1998, which he can forcibly appoint someone for a 210-day period, then also appoint them again for a consecutive 210-day period, adding up to 420 days in office just by him waving his wand.
So,
and it seems like Trump's willing to go to the mat for Matt Gaetz right now. No pun intended.
He is.
Okay.
And let me say on that point, though, this isn't an issue like, decades ago, somebody be up for confirmation and they didn't pay the taxes for their nanny or something like that, and they got out. Matt Gaetz is like, all warts and all have been well known by them before he's ever been nominated on this issue. So whether he's formally, confirmed, whether he's put in through recess appointments or the Vacancies Act, or whether he just goes to be a White House official that's not in an unconfirmed position. Let's be clear. Matt Gaetz is going to be an influential person in this administration. And I think, again, to that idea that Trump has made clear that he's not hiring personal fiefdoms. So while I do think, yes, it's really important to be, helpful for our issue that they are confirmed or in those positions, however may it come, it's also that the people that Trump puts in here are going to be expected to get this done. And I think we've seen something out of the Biden administration, right, where the outgoing president, has never been great on this issue, right? They've pushed this forward, due credit for them getting this going and pushing it along the way. They've also been a little bit scared of their shadow. And based on how the Trump administration is approaching basically everything that they're talking about, I can't imagine that now necessarily the one issue that they're not going to be going guns blazing on is following through on this commitment, when they are saying promises made, promises delivered. Trump was clear on this multiple times in interviews, multiple times in tweets, directly referencing the things and the action that we want done. And so for that part, I don't expect kind of the deep state on prohibitionist cannabis folks to be screwing us up here. We still got work to do. We've got a great team that are in and part of the Trump transition world. The industry's well coordinated, working together. I'm optimistic. I certainly think that again, how I began the discussion with you guys, cannabis was winning either way. It was going to be a little bit different depending on who did. But President Trump has been pretty darn clear, and we're going to hold his feet to the fire to make sure he follows through.
Yeah.
How much of this is a little bit of luck and them just playing political gamesmanship and noticing, hey, we're going to bring this thing. We're going to bring this thing home within the first 2 years of being in the Oval, as we're just going to put the nail in the coffin, and then they can't run on it in 2026, and they surely can't run on it in 2028. As far as a campaign point goes.
What's the president's pollster, Fabrizio, who's done work for the industry for a number of years, is a big proponent on this issue. That's his chief pollster and chief strategist. So yes, they're aware on it. Let's be clear. Trump has long kind of been somewhat supportive of cannabis. He's finally embraced it, like he embraced a lot of issues, right? Kind of the crypto, vape, cannabis, coalition of sorts, is where this is not like Mitt Romney, coming out for cannabis, trying to win the election at the end of the day, right? This is part of this new coalition. And it was the truth that whether Trump won or not, you've seen Republicans are starting to, embrace this issue.
Well, I think you're right. and we had lobbyist Don Murphy on Friday, and
Okay.
we've seen growing sentiment over the last couple of days that there's a divide happening more and more amongst the GOP. But he seems to be a firm believer that the last thing any Republican wants to do is go against Trump before they even actually begin the actual tenure of administration. So whether that actually happens or not, we'll find out regardless either way. I also wanted to talk to you about what do you think the biggest difference in your opinion when it comes to RFK leading the HHS versus Xavier Becerra? Because one thing that comes to mind, I hope RFK at least knows that Schedule 1 is where cannabis is listed, where Becerra, I don't know if you knew it was Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but
I'll give credit to Becerra. Becerra's the one that really got the ball rolling on this. He's the one that had the experience from California, that knew that the status quo wasn't right.
Yeah.
But let's be clear in all of this. What was key and important is that it was politics that began this process when Biden made that announcement, but it was the science that got us through here. And without the science, none of this was going to hold up. And I think, it's ultimately politics that's going to drive it home and get it finished. But, recognize science was the one that drove it. And that part of the process is done. And so I think having an RFK Jr. in there, continuing like Becerra has to cheerlead and get this, helpful is important. I think, the Attorney General, we saw this Attorney General has played key roles in this process. I just, like it or not, right? This incoming administration is not going to be clutching their pearls on issues, right? They are going to be getting shit done that they said that they were, like, on big things, huge things. And again, that's not the purpose of this call, is to talk or debate those other issues, but they're going to be doing huge things. So why would we think that they're not going to follow through and get, this process complete when the president ran on it? I think you've seen, a number of different Trump connected officials pointing out, even Chris Christie, right? Not exactly like Trump's kitchen cabinet these days, but just pointing out like the obvious that he's going to be following through on this issue. We got time ahead, right? He doesn't come in yet for 2 more months. But we're going to be seeing the plans coming out of this president-elect's, transition team soon. And I, for one, know that there's not going to be anything bad coming out on their transition priorities as it relates to cannabis. And we're going to see positive movement too.
Have you heard anything about a potential shortlist for whoever's going to take over as DEA administrator? By chance?
That's
in discussions with the transit, those that are, formally part of the transition team, right? We will not likely see something like a DEA administrator announced in the next, 30, 45 days, probably before the, president-elect comes in. But we're certain of one thing. We know in that interview process right now, when they're asking that question, the answer for someone is not to say, I'm against cannabis. It's, I saw President Trump stands on this issue, and I plan to get President Trump's agenda done. That is, from discussions with Trump transition team folks, that is the answer. There's no, ifs, ands, or buts about what the answer is. Now, that's also the answer on just about everything else, too. It just happens to be on our issue. There are going to be no personal fiefdoms in this. Trump had that in his last term, right? And he, points at for not getting a lot of his agenda done. Every sign, they're yelling it from the mountaintop. That's not how it's going to be happening this time around. And I will be the beneficiary on that issue, like will others.
Yeah. And whether it's Matt Gaetz appointed as Attorney General or a short list of names behind that, it all seems like it could be in favor of cannabis, but we shall see what happens. But did you guys get a chance to see the UFC fight on Saturday night?
Sure did.
Did you see that turnout? Like, I was like, I had a couple of buddies that were sitting at the 10th row and they're getting pictures, but I was just like, I logged on around 10:30 once the pay-per-view started. And I was just like, what is this? Vivek?
Everyone is doing the damn Trump dance on the UFC fights, the NFL. Everybody's literally going like this, doing the damn
all
Trump
those people
dance
around them, right? Are all cannabis fans too, right?
Correct.
They're all. There's probably some cannabis vaping going on there. Dare I say, right?
I'm hoping this is like Barron Trump got in his ear and is like, "Look, this is what is popular. This is what needs to happen, and just get it done."
Yeah.
And he's just we're lucking out that most of these people that are going into these positions are pro cannabis at the end of the day.
it was impressive to see that support and turnout amongst all of them. I thought it was awesome what they did.
Yeah.
But what wasn't awesome, I would not want to be on the back end of that kick that John Jones did to what's his name with that heel to the rib cage. Oh, heavyweights aren't that up.
Stipe's
It was a better fight than Friday night, by the way, too.
Friday night was a joke.
That women's boxing match prior, that was one of the best fights I have ever seen. What an effort. Big round of applause for both of them. But look, we talked earlier in this podcast about a paradigm shift with mental health and psychedelics. And, hopefully there is a lot of the same way. But it's exciting to see. I'm like, it definitely feels like we've turned a page, and we want to see obviously what happens next, because it was the status quo for such a long period of time. But also at the same time, managing expectations and realizing that these are all great speculations and what could be, but we've been down this road before. And unless actually something concrete happens, then we're still in kind of the same situation. But clearly, some of the stuff that we've heard so far, it's pointing in the right direction that we could see some change, and maybe the sweep of the Republican Party is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Well, they're taking listen, let me say this. Coalition work, I'm just going to preview a little bit. You'll see it in the days to come. We're taking the gloves off. And I'll reference this, that, the DEA has not been our friend in all of this, right? Let's be real clear. There's no more deep state allowed in this, I put that in quotes, in this new Trump, incoming Trump administration, right? The president-elect has been really clear about what he wants to see happen here, and he's going to expect that it gets done. And so we're going to be highlighting some of those things that the new incoming administration should be on the look for to clean up and fix. We feel good about where that transition team is. Again, the interview questions aren't, what are your plans on cannabis? The answer is, I plan to implement President-elect Trump's agenda. And we know what's on that agenda, and it's seeing safe banking passed. It's getting Schedule 3 done. It's understanding and respecting state markets. We'd just be having, if it was Harris, it was just going to be a different discussion, right? It would be about getting Schedule 3 done, and it would have been about comprehensive reform. Different things. But lucky for us, the top of the tickets, both presidential candidates were good on cannabis.
Before I let you go, one quick thing. We're like 2 weeks away from the ALJ hearing. Steve Bassos, thanks for the reminder. Any update with ALJ hearing participants? Has it been shortlisted? Any updates or feedback you can provide us pertaining to that?
You'll see again some shots that we'll have coming out here in the next couple of days.
Okay,
we'll make sure that you get to see. We expect good industry members, right? We're working in coalition with all the different participants. A couple of our coalition members were selected to participate. We had filings under a number of different entity names and so forth. And so we're at the table, and you're going to see some pressure. We're taking the gloves off, and watch for it in the next couple of days. Sorry, I can't say more.
Well, time's ticking. Can't believe it's like 2 weeks away, but here we are. And I know that at one time, we thought there wouldn't be an ALJ hearing, but there is now. And more now that the emotions have settled, maybe this isn't necessarily a bad thing, knowing that we're going about this the proper way. It's kind of the longer route, but that's cannabis for you. But regardless, keep the conversation going. And listen, keep in touch. Tell the crew, Jesse and the boys, that we say hi over at the Cannabis, and we'll follow up with you post the ALJ hearing and what we can expect next. Okay.
Good stuff. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Talk soon.
What a voice. What a voice. Somebody actually wrote this. Doesn't Tyson have a cannabis company?
Tyson 2.0.
It's got probably, what is
Tyson,
it? Top 5.
Tyson 2.0, Tyson 2.0 in the traditional cannabis channels. And then he's got Tyson's ear bites that I think are Delta 8 gummies. Oddly enough, they sell them in every medical marijuana card office in Florida.
Yeah. That was quite the event we were at a couple years ago at Jason's place in Florida. Jason Wild and him and Ric Flair came in, and that was a hurricane. And for any of you people out there watching for the first time, I was doing a ring announcing style to Tyson, who was choking on his smoke, laughing his ass off, because prior to this career, I was a big-time MMA ring announcer. But those days have since passed. What'd you think of that ring announcer at the event Friday night? Am I better than him?
I said to him, it was funny because you texted me shortly after that, and I'm literally sitting on my couch watching the fight, and I go, I wonder if Shad's better than this guy. because he looked, something wasn't right about him.
A little stiff.
And no, I definitely think you probably could have wiped the floor with him from an announcing standpoint.
Well, that's great news. Listen, got a big show coming up on Wednesday. Congresswoman from South Carolina, Nancy Mace. No, did I say that right?
You're right. She
will be joining us at 4:00. So mark it in your calendars. Nancy Mace is coming on, and she's come out with some pretty bold stuff regarding the cannabis space. Very exciting to say the least. So we're trying to go to the source, and we're getting some very, very good information and great guests. You'll get it firsthand. 4:00. And then afterwards, Seth Yakutin, who we had on a couple weeks ago, he's going to be coming on every Wednesday. We're going to be talking about the capital markets side of the industry and what we can really anticipate, because I know after Amendment 3, we talked about consolidation. So we'll touch on some of that stuff, but the idea is just to give you kind of a better idea. Cory, go ahead.
Michael Bronstein will be going over the new language in the Farm Bill on Wednesday as well.
Yes.
So it'll be another triple threat guest show leading off with Nancy going into Seth, and then I'm sure we'll finish with Mr. Bronstein.
Yeah. Lots going on as well. Leave some comments below. I'm actually doing a segment tomorrow with Emma Andrews from Next Leaf Solutions, Omar Khan from High Tide, and Michael Perrin from MTL Cannabis. We're going to talk about the Canadian cannabis landscape and the misconceptions that it has pertaining to it. So if there's any questions that you guys want me to ask in this interview, we're going to post it on Thursday. I would love to get your feedback and some of your comments. I will ask those questions in tomorrow's interview because it's important to hear what people's actual perception is within the Canadian market. It has fallen on hard times in the past, but there are some players like these three companies that are flourishing in the Canadian market. How? We'll find that out. But if there's some key questions you want me to ask each of them, please let me know now. It would be great to incorporate that in my interview. As usual, scan that QR code. Stay up to date on the latest news and developments pertaining to Washington as we get more and more interest and attention towards Attorney General, HHS announcements, what this means for the cannabis space, and as well as I said before, lots of info that you're providing every single day as we inch closer to this ALJ hearing, Anthony. So keep up the great work. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you guys back here on Wednesday at 4 with Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Thanks, everybody.
See you Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody, for watching our latest Trade to Black podcast. Listen, the U.S. election is now over. We're now in some uncharted territories and what to expect next, knowing the Trump administration will kick in next year. So what is next for the cannabis industry? This is why we need to stay connected. Ask any questions. We love your feedback. And always, as usual, if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.